Okay, hi
Hi
everyone.
everyone,
Welcome
welcome
to
to
today's
today's
session.
session.
So
So
today we
today
are
we are
going to
going to
do a
do a
synchronous
synchronous
code
code
review,
review,
and we
and we
have
have
Smith,
Smit,
who is
who is
basically
basically
a software
software
engineer
engineer
too at
too at
Postman.
Postman.
I am
I am
software
software
engineer
engineer
at
at
Postman,
Postman,
and we
and we
have
have
Sanambir.
Sanambir.
Sanambir has
Sanambir has
just
just
graduated
graduated
and
and
working
working
on
on
some
some
cool
cool
projects.
projects.
So we're
So we're
going
going
to
to
do a
do a
code
code
review
review
for
for
one of
one
the
of the
features
features
that is
that is
basically a
basically a
chat
chat
feature
feature
that
that
Sanambir
Sanambir
has
has
implemented.
implemented.
But
But
before we
before we
start
start
with
with
that,
that,
let's
let's
spend
spend
some
some
time
time
to
to
talk
talk
about the
about the
importance
importance
of
of
code
code
review.
review.
So,
So
basically,
basically,
I
I
believe
believe
that
that
code
code
review
review
is
is
one of
one of
the
the
most
most
important
important
and
and
the
the
fastest
fastest
way
way
to
to
grow as
grow
a
as a
developer.
developer.
And
And
every
every
company
company
these
these
days
days
have
has
some
some
quality
quality
benchmark,
benchmark,
and
and
basically,
basically
as a
as a
developer,
developer
we
we
have
have
to
to
consistently
consistently
have to
have
be
to be
basically
basically
um,
um,
writing
writing
code
code
at
at
that
that
quality,
quality,
and
and
to
to
maintain the
maintain the
quality,
quality
every
every
organization
organization
follow
follow
a
a
code
code
review
review
process.
process.
In
In
today's
today's
session,
session,
we are
we are
going to
going to
basically
basically
do
do
a
a
similar
similar
kind of
kind of
code
code
review
review
session.
session.
It will
It will
not
not
be
be
like
like
100%
100%
close to
close to
that,
that,
but we
but
will
we will
try
try
our
our
best to
best to
make
make
it
it
closer
closer
to
to
somewhere
somewhere
around
around
as
as
close
close
as
as
it
it
can
can
get.
get.
So
So
in the
in the
process,
process,
I
I
and
and
Smith
Smith
is
is
going to
going to
do
do
the
the
code
code
review
review
session.
session.
So
So
I
I
personally
personally
has
has
basically
basically
grown a
grown a
lot
lot
through
through
the
the
that
that
code
code
review
review
process,
process,
and
and
I
I
believe
believe
that I
that I
hope
hope
that
that
many
many
of
of
you
you
also
also
will
will
grown a
grown a
lot.
lot.
One
One
more
more
point
point
on
on
that.
that,
I
I
think
think
when
when
like
like
in the
in the
starting
starting
level,
level
when we
when we
write
write
some
some
code,
code,
and
and
let's say
let's say
that you
that you
implemented a
implemented a
feature,
feature,
and
and
then
then
when
when
that
that
feature
feature
goes
goes
into
into
the
the
is
is
reviewed
reviewed
by,
by,
let's
let's
say,
say,
a
a
software
software
engineer
engineer
2,
two,
or
or
basically,
basically,
let's
let's
say,
say,
a
a
senior
senior
software
software
engineer,
engineer,
right?
right?
Code
Code
review
review
is
is
that
that
place
place
where
where
you
you
can
can
see
see
that,
that,
okay,
okay,
you
you
have
have
implemented
implemented
this
this
feature
feature
using
using
the
the
approach,
approach,
and
and
now
now
the
the
person who
person who
has
has
some
some
experience
experience
building the
building the
application, they
application,
will
they will
tell
tell
you
you
that
that
no,
no,
this
this
thing
thing
has
has
some
some
there are
there are
some
some
issues in
issues
your
in your
approach,
approach,
right?
right?
And
And
they
they
will
will
basically
basically
tell you
tell
that,
you that,
okay,
okay,
maybe
maybe
this is
this is
not the
not the
correct
correct
approach,
approach.
at a
At a
scale
scale,
this will
this will
have
have
some
some
problems,
problems,
or
or
you
you
miss
miss
some
some
edge
edge
cases,
cases,
and
and
then
then
you
you
learn
learn
that,
that,
okay,
okay,
there is
there
a
is a
clear
clear
gap
gap
between
between
your
your
thinking
thinking
and the
and the
thinking
thinking
of
of
the
the
person who
person
is
who is
reviewing the
reviewing the
code.
code.
So
So
that
that
gap you
gap you
can
can
clearly
clearly
see,
see,
and
and
then you
then you
can
can
basically,
basically
with
with
time,
time
you
you
will
will
bridge
bridge
that
that
gap and
gap
you
and
will
you will
grow
grow
as a
as a
developer,
developer,
right?
right?
So
So
that is
that is
one
one
process,
process,
that the
that the
fastest
fastest
way
way
of
of
basically
basically
developing,
developing,
growing
growing
as
as
a
a
developer,
developer,
right?
right?
So
So
yeah,
yeah,
so we
so
are
we are
going to
going to
do
do
that
that
code
code
review.
review.
So
So
we
we
have
have
Sanamir
Sanambir
Singh
Singh
here.
here.
Just a
Just a
second.
second.
Let me
Let me
pull
pull
up
up
his
his
your
your
PR,
PR,
and
and
all right.
all right.
So
So
yeah,
yeah.
so
So
can you
can you
talk
talk
about
about
the
the
application
application
that you
that you
have
have
built?
built?
Give me a
Give me a
second.
second.
Let me
Let me
open up
open up
your
your
application.
application.
So I
So
can
I can
see
see
that
that
you have
you
a
have a
social
social
web
web
app. Can
app.
you
Can you
talk
talk
about,
about,
explain
explain
me
me
what
what
this
this
application
application
is,
is,
and
and
what
what
is
is
the
the
tech
tech
stack that
stack
you
that
have
you
used?
have
I
used?
can
I can
see
see
that
that
the
the
good
good
thing
thing
that you
that you
have
have
maintained is
maintained is
that you
that you
have
have
written a
written a
good
good
README.
README.
There are
There
some
are some
couple of
couple of
feedbacks on
feedbacks
that.
on
I
that.
can
I
see
can
the
see the
screenshots
screenshots
also
also
attached.
attached.
But yeah,
But
can
yeah,
you
can you
quickly give
quickly give
us
us
basically
basically
about
about
some
some
information
information
about this
about this
project?
project?
Yeah, sure. So social web application is a Instagram-like web application. So it includes the features like creating a post, a proper authentication system where user can post images, comment on a post, like post, follow unfollow users, and they can edit their profile as well. And there is one niche feature which is the messaging, where you can message globally, which is the kind of like world chat where you can talk to every user on the application. And there is also a direct messaging where you can talk personally or private, where the direct messaging includes features like online offline status, where you can see the notifications of an incoming message. And there are other several features which are in progress, but in near future, I'm going to implement those features. So talking about tech stack, I have used EJS, SCSS on the client side, and for my backend, I've used Node.js, Express.js, MongoDB Atlas, and Redis as my database for my backend tools. And talking about the build tools, so in development, I'm using the SCSS or SAS compiler to compile my CSS file to CSS files. And for production, I'm using Gulp to compile all my files into a single folder, or minify those file and optimize those file for production. Yeah,
Per- per-
that's
per-
that
per-
was about my tech stack.
Perfect, perfect. So I can see that this looks good. And as a fresher
Yeah.
level, building an application at with this, and like the UI is also pretty smooth. So yeah, first of all, congratulations for building such a good application.
Thank you.
So basically, we are going to review the PR that we have raised is for ad support for chat. So we are not going to review the whole code, obviously, because that is a lot to review in a single process. In fact, in organization, whenever you are building on the feature, the code review happens on feature level, right? So can you basically talk about this feature, how you have implemented it, what are the third-party library you have used to implement this particular feature, and if you have used a third-party library, or what was the reason for behind that?
Okay, so first of all, in order to implement a chat feature, there are several methods, and you can follow whichever you like. So the let's talk about the first method, which is the traditional method, how our client and server talks, which is the HTTP protocol. Yes, you can use the HTTP protocol. I think so, because HTTP protocol is the traditional way where you can send a request and server responds back. In this case, if you want to implement the chat application, we could have done with the HTTP protocol, like where the user sends the request to the server and server process that request and responds back. But as you see, there's a problem in HTTP. Not a problem, we can say. It's time consuming. So why time consuming? Because HTTP protocols are stateless. So a server doesn't know the last request was from which user. So this was a drawback. So in order to cope up with this drawback, we there's another protocol which is WebSockets. So WebSockets made it super easy to talk to the server and get response back in very much less latency, we can say. So WebSockets. So what does WebSockets do? What HTTP can't do? So WebSockets are first of all stateful protocol, which means server knows which request has been sent by which user at what moment. Okay, so with this kind of information, we can maintain the sessions, or you can say the connection. So let's suppose there are five users and one server. So simultaneously, five users can uh, yeah. So five users can get connection to the server at the same moment uh, without losing any connection. So which means WebSockets are bidirectional, or you can call it as full duplex. So actually, WebSockets works over a TCP connection. First, client sends a request as a HTTP, then server process it, and then see it can be upgraded over to the WebSocket. If it is upgradable, the server upgrades that connection to the WebSocket, and the bidirectional connection is being established. Okay, so talking about the WebSockets, so first of all, we can use native WebSockets. All right. So native WebSockets are a little bit tough. We can use some libraries, which I have used in my project personally, which is socket.io library, which made it super simple or more easy to implement this socket.io. WebSockets. So yeah, that's the reason why I have used this socket.io. Yeah.
I think it makes sense. Smith, you have any questions around that?
Uh, no. So I mean, uh, like whatever you explained, sorry,
Sanamir.
Sanambi. Sorry, so Sanambi, whatever you explained was like perfect. But all of these things should ideally be in the PR description. So if you have added it in the PR description, then it's great. Uh, like otherwise, it should be there
No, it is not
because.
added. Yeah.
Hmm. And yeah, apart from that, like whatever you explained was like uh, super informative for a newcomer. But I guess if your target audience is like, let's say, an SD2 or SD3, I would like your description to be a bit uh, like focused on uh, whatever you're implementing, right? For example, you explained the entire like WebSocket theory, which is like very good and useful to know, but it might not be as important to include the entire information in the PR description, right? Or whoever you are explaining to, like just explain that you are using WebSocket and just a quick like 1 to 2 lines or 5 lines, 5 statements about WebSockets, and then you can proceed. Yeah, about the rest of like what is the core logic about your PR. So
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
yeah,
Also, Sanamir, so you have added the title as add support for chat, right? My question is that chat, like, does it also had the support for one-on-one or as well as the group chat, or just chat? So that is not bit like we can update the title also. I think in here you have said add support for group and one-on-one chat. So you can explain that that would clearly say, and in the description whatever is it mentioned, whatever decisions, like whatever you have library you have used, you can, and why you have used, just give a brief info. Also the package that you have used, the third party package that you have used, you need to mention that, and what was the reason behind picking that specific package itself. Why can't any other package, right? Because is there any security concerns related to that package or not? So you can like attach. So in the when you are working in a company, maybe you can basically attach the discussion conference doc here, attach those, which basically had a discussion around the use of the third party packages.
yeah. Adding on top of what Anshu said, like that implementation spec should be as detailed as possible, right? So whatever you mentioned, like the theory about WebSockets and everything, should be in that doc, and you don't need to include it in the PR description, right? One more thing that I would like to add is, yeah, same. Add support for chat should be more specific. Like as Anshu mentioned, if you have added support for just one type of chat, it should be that. Secondly, the branch name, right? The branch name is feature slash messaging, whereas the PR description or the PR name is add support for chat. So like it is very nitpicky, but ideally both of them should be the same. Like it should be either feature support for chat, like, or the PR title should have messaging somewhere. So like just for connection or better and like relation to the PR reviewer. Yeah. Second thing, like, sorry, one last thing that I would like to point out is, Anshu, can you just go to the top? So as you can see, like this is a very like huge PR. It has 82 files, and the number of diff is also like around 5.5k lines of code, right? So like just one rule of thought or one thumb rule that I would like to give to you is that the as long as your PR is like, if your PR is very long, it becomes difficult for the reviewer to review it. And if it becomes difficult for your reviewer to review it, there are high chances that bugs may creep in your code, right? So try to keep your PR as modular or as compact as possible. For example, like this PR may have like 12 small logics coupled into them. So you can break each logic into a separate PR if possible. So that makes it easy for your reviewer to review your code, and yeah, and this leads to lesser chances of bugs creeping in. So that is also one thing that you can keep in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, noted.
Just for example, that you can add that add support for one-on-one chat, add support for group chat, and you can just separate out the logic for both of them, right? These two logic, when you are two different basically two different feature. So chat is your high level feature, that in that you are providing these two features, right? So these two things should be implemented separately, and there should be two PRs for that. Also in the code you should handle them separately, because moving forward your application will scale, and you will have lot and lot of features that should be specific to the group chat, and some of them will be specific to the feature one, right? So it makes sense to basically keep them separate, not in a single function or a single PR, of course. Cool. So, yeah, let's start with the review. So, in the today's session, we are going to only review about the chat feature. So, the your chat API, and of course also the time allow. We will review your friends controller and the model. So, the prime focus is that general coding standard and the implementation behind that. So, if I take a quick scan of the code, right, couple of things I want to point out before I hand over this whole review to Smith is basically whenever you are so first of all, like when you are writing a controller function, right, let's say that you are creating a chat room here, right? So basically I can see that here you this function handles there is a check called type global. I'm assuming that this is basically you are checking whether the chat room that you are creating is for global or for 101, right?
Yes.
So this should not be handled in a single function. You should have basically created two functions. One for create chat room for global, and create chat room for 101. So that's the first thing, handling everything in a single function. So you can break them down into functions so that you can reuse them later. That also makes sense. Another thing is that there is no data validation, right? So you are getting the data from params. What happens if the params is not there? What happens if someone send you invalid params? So it is always a good practice to validate the body, that whatever the data that is coming in the your body, right? So generally a good coding practice is that whenever you are writing a controller function, right, extract the data from your request and then call a function and just write your business logic inside that function. Now why I'm saying that, because in that function you can basically, that function can take the parameters, and you can then write a JS doc for that function, right? That what are the parameters that the function takes, and what are the data type of every parameter, right? So that's the one standard that we follow. Apart from that, I can see that the error handling, generally we use a global error middleware to handle the error. We don't handle it like at every state. Like we can see that there is a 500 error handling here, right? So we don't do this console.log. Generally, just create a middleware, error middleware, so that any error that occur in your application should be caught by that middleware, right? So in Express, we have you can create a error middleware, and basically you can start throwing the errors. And when you are throwing the error, you also have to specify. So in your application, you can have different types of error, right? For example, here this is a server error, right? Then you can have, let's say, a connection error. Let's say you're trying to connect to a database, it's not connected, so that's a server error. There is some, let's say, there is some exception, right? So you can create different error classes for that, and you can start throwing those error types, and your middleware will pick that up and then handle based on the type of error. It can decide what to do, right? Because error handling is the most important thing that you should do. And when I am going to the log and checking the error, based on the type of the error, I should be able to know that, okay, what was the type of error that was occurred, right? So
Yes.
that is one thing. Another thing is that when you are sending response, so I personally prefer, I think Smith, you can explain more on that, is whenever you are returning responses, your response should have, like, you can create generic response functions like successful, let's say this is the internal server response. Then there will be some unauthorized response, there is some bad response, right? So if you are handling this kind of thing and you're writing this again and again, right? Let's say that when you are writing this thing, and let's say that tomorrow you have to change the structure of your error, for, let's say, for your success, you want to change the structure your successful response, then you have to go and make these changes to everywhere where you are sending it, right? But having a common function for your responses will allow you to change the structure of any response through from a single place. So that also helps. So these are the couple top level thing that I can see. uh, I will hand over this review to Smith from here.
Yeah, thank you, Anshu. It was very helpful. Okay. Uh, so yeah, let's begin the review process. So Parambir, first of all, let's keep the session interactive. And
Um,
I think Smith
hello.
having some problem. Yeah, Smith, we lost you for some time.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So, yeah, Anshu, can you open the code review session? Yeah. Sorry. So, yeah, let's begin the code review session. Paramveer, like to understand your code a bit better, I'll ask you a couple of questions, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, uh, yeah, let's keep the session a bit interactive, right? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I can see here that we are introducing a new endpoint in this. Yeah, right. Can you confirm that?
Yes.
Correct. Hmm.
So if I go
Okay.
to
So,
the chat.js,
hmm.
you this is create a message PR which is creating the chat. Okay, this is sender receiver. This one is creating the this endpoint is
Correct.
Chat
called.
room.
Yes.
So like one thing that you can keep in mind is whenever any of your change introduces a new endpoint or modifies some payload in a new endpoint, make sure that you attach like some kind of a blueprint for that. For example, you can have a blueprint Postman collection, or you can have a Swagger doc, or something that can act as a reference to what is changing in your endpoint, right? Which eases the job of your reviewer, like because he can like see what is changing in that request, right? So otherwise, like just seeing the code is a bit bland and makes it difficult for the reviewer, right? So
Okay.
always ensure that whatever change you are doing, you share one blueprint in some format, right? That is one thing.
All right.
Uh, yeah. Uh, Apart from that, yeah. So another thing is like not for the authors, but like in your repository, always try to have some default checklists or uh, default checks so that, for example, to maintain one particular standard in your code repository, like you can have default pull requests that can have some sort of checklist item which a developer can mark so that like even if you are not there in the future or you are not reviewing the code, still that standard is followed. So there should be some particular standard doc in your like default PR description or default task or somewhere, right? Yeah, so let's go to the main code. Um,
Which file you are want me to open? This one.
Chat API, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, one more thing before we start the review. Uh, like there might be even some things that like so PR reviews do take time, right? And especially if you are async, like there is a lot involved between like you will add a review, like you will send a PR for review, then your reviewer might not be free for a certain amount of time, then he will see, then he'll get back to you, then you might not have some bandwidth. So it is always like very helpful to do one round of self review before you raise a PR for review, right? So one good
Right.
practice could be that like whenever you have done the change and whenever you before you commit it, you stage the file, right? So whenever you stage a file, you should do one round of scan over that file, right? To see if like if the changes look good to you, right? This can like this can help avoid some like repetitive statements that generally occur. For example, you might have added some console.log or console.error while like debugging locally, right? But this
Mhm.
console.log or error is not required when the code goes to production or even goes to staging. So all of that thing can be easily caught in the self-review process and can help save time of the reviewer and the author both, right?
Okay.
So yeah, that is one thing. Okay. Hmm. So here we first need to remove console.log, and here the chat room ID, right? We have used let here. So is chat room ID being modified anywhere else in this function?
Um, Not so. I guess not.
Hmm. So if chat room ID is not getting modified, we should use const, because if you
Okay.
use let
Hmm.
and like const helps us to avoid this getting modified in the future.
Yeah,
So
making it immutable.
correct. Use const for any variable that you are not supposed to modify.
Okay.
Yes. Second is data. What is data exactly? Can you scroll up? Data is coming from the request body, right?
Params.
Params.
Request params, correct. So this should have some validations before we try to access the object, because what if someone sends an empty object in the data or in the request body, right? And their params, like
Okay.
someone sends an empty param that can, and if you try to access like data dot receiver or data dot sender, it does not practically work, because that variable can become undefined, and due to that variable being undefined, that can have some like side effects where,
Right.
let's say, sender was supposed to be a string, but now it is coming as undefined, and you get it right. So
Right.
there should always be some sort of validations, like as Anshu mentioned.
Okay. So what I did was just I have encapsulated my code into a single try catch block and
Hmm,
generalized the error like direct internal server error. So I should have separated each error where I get to know more information out of those errors.
correct. So what we generally do, like what I generally follow is I like before moving, like before going ahead to the main logic, what I do is
Mhm.
create a validator function that takes in the all the inputs that need to be validated, and validate it one by one. Like literally every variable needs to be type validated, which can be taken care of by the language if it is TypeScript or like static type hinting. But if it is JS, we might need to do a custom validation. So like what I follow is I create a validator function which takes in all the inputs and like validates. And generally, like validation errors are 4x, right? So that response can be a common response. So that validator helps us to ensure that the input is properly like sanitized and is in the format that we expect. So nothing is unexpected, right? Um,
Okay.
Yeah,
so
just
always like,
just to add on Smith point. So this params is basically is some kind of a Mongoose ID, right?
Right. ID.
So you can use, so here you can use express body validator, and that provide built-in functions. So like if you don't want to write your own custom validator, you can use express body validator, which allow you to validate the params, query params with the any body, and it also allow you to check whether these are the proper, like are you sending a Mongoose ID or not, right? Or it's some random string that the user is sending. So you can have that level of granular check using the express validator.
Okay. Noted.
if data dot type equal to global, uh, what is data dot type? Like what all types can be there in the data?
So there are two types, global and private. So
Hmm.
they are both strings.
Hmm.
One is global and else it is private.
Okay. So what if someone sends in a third type called, let's say, protected or something, some anything else than global or private? So Anshu, can you like collapse that if block? or go below that if block if it is
Yeah,
not collapsible.
I
I
think
think
I
I
think it
think it
should
should
be
be
there
there
are
are
if,
if,
so there
so
is
there
no
is no
else
else
of
of
if,
if,
or there
or
is
there
a
is a
Hmm.
um,
Sanam, there
Sanam,
is
there
I
is
anything
think
anything
else.
else?
could you scroll below?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Scroll below. I think this else is
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
So this else is the one where the type is not global. So you
Right.
so this is one like this can possibly be one issue. So right now it is fine because the types are either global or private. But let's say in future if you introduce a new type, protected,
Hmm.
right? Like and since this is an input, even if I enter type as uh, Anshu, right? It will go into this else block because there is no validation here. So ideally, whenever there are any like dynamic inputs, you should have an enum of allowed types, and that validator function that we have, right? That should always check that the type is in that the type that the user is passing in the param should always be confined within those enum, right? And if it is not, then it is not something that is expected, and we should always throw a validation error, right?
Okay, so I'm thinking of one scenario like
Hmm.
currently it is global and private. So
Hmm.
what if or what if I introduce a group chat? So group chat would have another type, right? So it would have been type group. So that's
Hmm.
a great view on this if else condition. So yeah, I would definitely work on this.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
just
just
to
to
add
add,
on top
top
of
of
that,
that,
so like
like
you,
you,
as
as
I
I
said in
said
the
in the
like
like
as I
as I
mentioned
mentioned
earlier,
earlier,
that
that
you can
you can
have
have
different
different
functions
functions
like
like
create
create
global
global
chat
chat
room,
room,
create
create
social
social
groups,
groups,
create
create
101,
101,
and
and
then
then
based on
based
the
on the
type
type,
you
you
can
can
use
use
switch a
switch a
statement
statement
and
and
call the
call the
respective
respective
functions.
functions.
So
So
that
that
would
would
be
be
the
the
one
one
you can do.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. If the number of like if the number of expected parameters become very high, then using a switch is more like clean approach. You can always like catch it. Like if something is not expected, it will go in the default block, and in the default block you can always throw an exception there. So it is more clean than using like nested if else.
all right.
so
So
one more
one more
question,
question,
Sanambi,
Sanambi,
that
that
so
so
we
we
don't
don't
use
use
callback
callback
now
now
these
these
days,
days,
right?
right?
So
So Yes, yes, I know, I know.
you
You
can
can
use
use
async
async
await
await
that
that
increase
increase
the
the
code,
code,
like it
it
increases,
increases,
it
it
make it
make it
look
look
more
more
better.
better.
So
Yeah. So
just try
just try
to
to
follow
follow
that.
that.
One
One
question I
question I
have
have
is,
is,
Mhm.
mhm, yeah. Actually, I faced this problem. Like I have upgraded the Mongoose library, and
Mhm.
the in the latest libraries they have deprecated the or removed the callbacks function, and they
Mhm.
throw like callback is not accepted. But I'm currently on the earlier version of the Mongoose, so the code works fine for now. But I'm in the APIs, as you can see, like in the post API or comments API, I have removed the callbacks and shifted to the async await. But for chat, I guess I haven't done yet.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
okay.
Uh,
Uh,
that's
that's
fine.
fine.
One
One
question
question
is,
is,
can
can
you
you
just
just
tell
tell
me
me
this,
this,
right? I
right? I
need to
need to
understand the
understand the
implementation
implementation
part.
part.
Like I
Like
can
I
see
can see
some
some
thing
thing
that
that
you are
you are
trying
trying
to
to
do.
do.
You're
You're
creating a
creating a
chat room
chat room
ID
ID
using the
using the
sender
sender
and
and
receiver,
receiver,
and then
and
there
then
is
there is
something
something
called
called
reverse
reverse
chat
chat
ID,
ID,
room
room
ID.
ID.
This
This
looks
looks
bad. Can
bad.
you
Can
tell
you
me
tell me
what is
what is
the
the
your
your
idea
idea
behind
behind
what
what
is
is
thought
thought
process
process
for
for
this thing
this
and
thing
what
and
you're
what you're
trying to
trying
do
to do
here?
here? Okay, so initially what I thought was in order to create a private chat room, there should be a unique identifier to locate that chat room, right? So at first I thought it would be simple if I create a from user and concatenate it with the to user. But this arose a problem on the like what if okay, so there are two scenarios. First is the client, let's suppose me, and the other client is Anshu, you, right? Sanambi. But from your side, Anshu, your from user will be your ID. So this uh, arose a problem where two separate rooms would have been created, right? So in order to cope up with that problem, what I did, I created two combinations, which is the first from user plus to user, and second is the to user plus from user. So if the first chat room ID exists, well and good, the code will execute and process query the data. And if the first room doesn't exist, it will move on to the second variable, which is the reverse chat room ID. So that was the thought process of finding out the chat room and creating a chat room.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but let's
let's
say
say if
if
I
I
want to
want to
talk to
talk
you,
to you,
right?
right?
Let's
Let's
talk
talk
about
about
one
one
on
on
one,
one,
right?
right?
You
You
need
need
a
a
unique
Yes.
unique
unique
value
value
to
to
create
create
a
a
room,
room,
and
and
then so
then
that
so
you
that you
can
can
start
start
broadcasting your
broadcasting your
events in
events in
that
that
room,
room,
right?
right?
So
So
you are
you are
using the
using the
sender
sender
and
and
receiver,
receiver,
right?
right?
Now
Now
that
Yes.
that
is
is
bad.
bad,
Like I
right?
can
I can
see
see
because of
because of
that,
that,
when the
when the
other
other
person
person
want to
want to
send the
send the
message,
message,
you are
you are
doing the
doing the
reverse
reverse
lookup
lookup
also, right?
also,
You're
right? You're
creating
creating
a
a
you're
you're
just
just
searching for
searching for
that,
that.
that
That
okay,
okay,
if
if
let's
let's
say
say
you are
you are
sending a
sending a
message
message
to
to
me,
me,
then the
then the
chat room
chat
is
room is
Sanambir
Sanambir
and
and
Ansu.
Ansu.
And when
And when
I'm
I'm
sending the
sending the
message, you
message,
are
you are
just
just
checking
checking
for
for
that,
that
if
if
Ansu is
Ansu is
trying to
trying to
send a
send a
message to
message to
Sanambir, you
Sanambir,
are
you are
checking
checking
that
that
is
is
there
there
any
any
chat
chat
room
room
which
which
has
has
like
like
from
from
and
and
to
to
is
is
switched
switched
now.
now,
So you are
so you are
doing a
doing a
reverse
reverse
lookup,
lookup
and
and
then
then
you're
you're
wasting one
wasting one
more
more
query,
query,
right?
right?
Now the
Now the
thing
thing
is
is
that
that
Right.
if you
if
are
you are
trying to
trying to
set up a
set up a
one-to-one
one-to-one
connection
connection
chat,
chat,
right?
right?
Before
Before
we
we before
before we
we
start the
start the
chatting,
chatting,
right,
right,
you
you
might be
might be
creating
creating
registering
registering
this
this
friendship,
friendship,
we're
we're
talking
talking
about the
about the
friends,
friends,
right?
right?
You
You
might be
might be
creating
creating
Mhm.
storing this
storing this
information. Let's
information.
say
Let's say
that
that
you are
you are
creating a
creating a
friend,
friend,
right?
right?
In
In
real
real
world,
world,
what we
what we
do,
do,
we
we
send a
send a
friend
friend
request,
request,
and the
and the
moment
moment
someone
someone
accept a
accept a
friend
friend
request, we
request, we
create a
create a
friendship,
friendship,
right?
right?
In
In
that
that
friends
friends
means
means
Yes.
you
you
can
can
mention
mention
the
the
two
two
from
from
and
and
to.
to.
So
So
every
every
friends
friends
that
that
are
are
getting
getting
created
created
in
in
your
your
database
database
will
will
have a
have a
unique
unique
ID,
ID,
right?
right?
And
And
that
that
Yes.
unique
unique
ID will
ID
be
will be
same
same
for
for
both the
both the
person.
person.
It will
It
be
will be
same
same
for
for
me and
me and
you.
you.
It will be
It will be
same
same
for
for
you
you
and
and
me,
me,
right?
right?
So
So
you
you
can
can
use
use
that
Yes.
that
unique
unique
ID as
ID
your
as your
chat
chat
room
room
for
for
directing
directing
all
all
your
your
one-on-one,
one-on-one,
right?
right?
And
And
that will
that will
save you
save you
Right.
from the
from the
reverse
reverse
lookup,
lookup.
and
And
like you
like
don't
you
have
don't
to
have to
create this
create this
chat room.
chat
You
room. You
just
just
and
and
you
you
can
can
create the
create the
mapping
mapping
of
of
users
users
and the
and the
friends,
friends,
right?
right?
So
So
in
in
my
my
users
users
table, you
table, you
can
can
maintain the
maintain the
reference
reference
of
of
all
all
my
my
friends,
friends,
and
and
it will
it will
have a
have a
friendship
friendship
IDs,
IDs,
and
and
then you
then
can
you can
populate
populate
all
all
those
those
friends
friends
when
when
I've
I've
landed on
landed
the
on the
page.
page.
The
The
moment I
moment I
click
click
on
on
those
those
things,
things, you
create a
create a
chat room
chat room
based on
based
the
on the
friends
friends
ID,
ID,
right?
right?
So
So
I
I
think
Right.
think
that will
that will
save
save
you
you
from an
from an
extra
extra
call,
call,
and
and
you
you
don't
don't
have
have
to
Yeah.
to
mess your
mess your
head
head
around
around
this
this
creating a
creating a
chat room
chat room
using
using
from and
from
to,
and to,
right?
right?
Make
Make
sense?
sense?
Yes. There was a 50-50% chance that in the first hit I will be targeting the correct room. So that was great to know.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean,
yeah,
yeah,
you
you
can
can
do
do
that. In
that. In
fact, for
fact,
the
for the
group,
group,
so the
so the
reason
reason
why,
why,
if you
if you
move
move
the
the
implementation
implementation
of the
of the
group
group
chat
chat
also,
also,
like, right, so
right,
you
so
can
you can
just
just
create a
create a
group
group
schema
schema
indifferently,
indifferently,
and
and
group
group
will
will
have
have
different
different
users,
users,
and
and
every
every
group
group
will
will
have a
have a
group
group
ID,
ID,
right?
right?
And
And
that
that
ID
ID
will be
will be
acting as
acting as
a
a
unique
unique
identifier
identifier
which you
which you
can
can
use to
use to
create the
create the
chat room,
chat room,
right?
right?
So
So
all the
all the
people
people
users
users
that
that
are
are
in
in
that
that
group,
group,
they will
they will
be
be
broadcasting their
broadcasting their
messages in
messages in
that
that
chat
chat
room,
room,
right?
right?
So
So
you
you
can
can
Right.
that's the
that's the
advantage
advantage
of
of
separating the
separating the
logic
logic
of the
of the
group
group
to
to
one to
one to
one,
one,
because
because
then you
then
don't
you don't
have
have
to
to
handle
handle
both the
both the
scenarios in
scenarios
a
in a
single
single
function or
function
a
or a
single
single
schema,
schema,
because when
because
you
when you
do
do
it,
it,
then
then
things
things
start
start
becoming
becoming
complex, of
complex, of
course.
course.
Right. Okay.
Yes,
Yes,
Smith,
Smith,
we
we
can
can
move
move
forward
forward
i- if you have
if you
any
have any
question.
question.
Okay, can you just scroll up?
Yeah.
So just scroll up, scroll up. Huh. So if data dot type is global, which means, so what were the two data types? Global and private, right?
Private, right?
What does global exactly mean? It is a
So
group.
global is the world chat kind of thing. So all the users on the web application are
Hmm.
the global users, all the
Hmm.
users.
Okay, and what does private mean? It is like between two people or it is a private group,
Yes,
right?
private only between one on one. So
Okay,
two
it's only
users.
one on one. Got it, got it. So let we should always write a code in such a way that any new person who's seeing the code for the first time should also understand. So here maybe if you could add one comment like indicating what are the valid data types, right? That will be helpful to
Okay.
someone who is new, right? Okay, so chat room ID is data.type, but we know that data.type is global here, right? So chat room ID, but chat room ID was supposed to be wait, chat room ID was supposed to be data.receiver plus data.sender, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I
Sorry,
have
sender
made
plus
that
receiver,
global.
right?
Yes, yes.
And here we are updating chatroom ID to data.type. So we are updating chatroom ID to global. Like why are we doing that?
Um, 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are two scenarios. In global, I have made the chat room ID to the global string, not the unique identifier. So that's the reason why I have updated the chat room ID to the global.
Okay. So I think yeah that okay I get it. But then I
Yeah.
think that the logic of doing chatroom ID is sender plus receiver and reverse chatroom ID,
Hmm.
that all should go inside the private, like if the chat type is private, right? There is
Yeah,
no
right,
point
right.
in computing, like doing unnecessary
In the
computation
global.
in case of global,
Yes.
right? So that can go in the else part, right?
Okay, got
Yeah.
it.
Okay. And what we are doing here is chatroom dot find one. We are finding okay, we are finding the what did why are there two populates? Like one populate is on line 14 and one is on 15. So why
Okay,
can't we
so
combine? You know?
first of all, I populated all the messages, then populated the senders of that messages. So in order to get their user profile, user email, username, and stuff.
We could not have combined both the populates into a single one.
Um, I don't have an idea around this. So
Hmm. Okay, so just check once. Like if that is possible, we can avoid the second part.
So both these populates, both of them are on a same level, right? Both the I can see that messages are you are just doing messages and sender, right? So you are seeing that populate messages here, and you are
okay,
also seeing populate messages here. So this is duplicate.
no, no. Actually, regarding this query, first, what Mongoose does is populating the messages. Then we need, in order to fill those senders, we need to define the path. So the path is the messages, and in that path, sender. So it is not duplicating the population. It is just defining the path where does the sender exist. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's the
Mhm.
Got it.
key
Got it.
point.
Got it.
There is
Makes sense.
messages, and where is sender? Sender is inside the, oh, you are doing a ref of
Uh,
chat. Yeah, I got it. Ref of chat.
yes,
And in the chat, you will have sender
sender,
and
and I'm populating the user.
user. Got it. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're not going on the review of the model schema. That will take a lot of time. But yeah, I mean, we got it.
Yeah, makes sense. Here in the dot exec, if we have an error. Ah, okay. One more thing that I would like to suggest is in case of an error, we are doing console.log, right? Console by doing console.log, what we are doing is we are exposing the error message to the end user, right? Which might not be favorable. Like we might not want to expose this exact error message to the end user. So either we expose a generic error message, and that error message, like we can use a separate like service like Sentry or something which can like show the error internally but not to the end user. That is one thing we can do. Another thing is, as Anshu mentioned, we should try to create a sort of a wrapper classes inside the response or middlewares. Like for example, to keep the schema uniform, right? For example, if it is a 200, we might always want to expose a certain field, a few fields, right? If it is unauthorized, we can simply call it return response dot unauthorized, and we can pass the relevant field to that. instead of writing return res.200 status 200 and all the fields every time, that wrapper can help us keep the code clean and also keep the fields uniform in the response. That is
Yes.
one thing. um,
So,
So
Sonam,
now
I
I
have
have
a
one
one
question.
question.
So
So,
why
why
you're
you're
doing
doing
this
this
Yes.
find
find
one?
one?
Once
Once
you
you
find
find
the
the chat
chat
room
room
and
and
you
you
got
got
all
all
the
the
data
data
out
out
of
of
it,
it,
what
what
you're
you're
doing
doing
here?
here?
Are
Are
you
you
rendering
rendering
all
all
this
this
data
data
in
in
the?
the?
So
So
these are
these are
like the
like the
previous
previous
data
data
messages
messages
of
or
between a
between a
one-on-one
one-on-one
people,
people,
right,
right,
or a
or a
group
group
chat.
chat.
Uh, yes. So if the chat room exists, okay. So this event occurs when user click the global chat button. So in behind the scenes, we need to fetch all the messages like they are persistent and they are stored in the data list, and I'm sending it into the data form. So yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Can
Can
you?
you?
I
I
lost you
lost you
for
for
some
some
time,
time,
or
or
maybe.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you
Can
hear
you
me
hear
now?
me now?
Okay, आपका connection issue. Yes, yes, audible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you
Can you
repeat
repeat
that
that
thing
thing
again,
again,
please?
please?
Okay, so I've lost the question. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
My
question is
question
why
is why
you're
you're
before
before
creating the
creating the
chat room,
chat
you're
room,
doing
you're
a
doing a
find one,
find one,
right?
right?
And
And
then
then
once you
once you
find the
find the
data,
data,
what you're
what you're
doing?
doing,
Why
why
you're
you're
doing a
doing a
find one
find one
query?
query.
Okay, so in my chat application, I have there's a global chat button. So I'm not fetching the global chats behind the scenes when the user is online. I am fetching the chats when user clicks on that global chat button. So you see there's a loading messages.
Mm-hmm.
That's the time when there's a request to the server and the all the messages are fetched. So
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
that's why I have written those messages in the response.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So
So,
okay, so
okay,
you
so
are
you are
just
just
saying
saying
that
that
okay,
okay,
you're
you're
finding
finding
that
that
okay,
okay,
this is
this is,
if
if
this is
this
a
is a
global,
global,
you
you
are
are
doing
doing
that,
that,
you're
you're
doing a
doing a
find
find
one
one,
that
that
if
if
it
it
exists,
exists,
then let
then
me
let me
populate the
populate the
data.
data.
If
Hmm.
it
If it
doesn't
doesn't
exist,
exist,
then
then
let me
let me
basically
basically
create
create
one
one
chat
chat
room
room
and
and
populate the
populate the
from
from
and
and
send.
send.
If it's
If
a
it's a
one-on-one,
one-on-one,
you're
you're
doing the
doing the
same
same
thing
thing
for
Yes,
for
both the
both the
cases,
cases,
right?
right?
Okay.
right.
Okay. Now my
Now my
question is,
question is,
Sanambi, is
Sanambi, is
this,
this,
right?
right?
Let's say
Let's say
user
user
comes
comes
here
here
and
and
every
every
time I
time I
click
click
on
on
any
any
person,
person,
right,
right,
you're
you're
doing this
doing this
lookup
lookup
of
of
find
find
one,
one,
right?
right?
Uh,
Uh,
Um, can you repeat that again?
ev- yeah.
yeah,
Let's say
let's say
every
every
time I
time I
click
click
on
on
any one
any
of
one
the
of the
friends
friends
here,
here,
right?
right?
Let's say
Let's say
that
that
there
there
are a lot
are a
of
lot of
friends
friends
here,
here,
right?
right?
If I
If I
click on
click
any
on
one
any
of the
one of the
person
person
and
and
then you
then
are
you are
doing
doing
this
this
lookup,
lookup,
right?
right?
Let's say
Let's
if
say
I
if I
want to
want to
You
chat
chat
can
to.
to.
test this out actually. You can go to my profile and follow me there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's say
let's
there
say
are
there are
these are the
these are the
list of
list of
users,
users,
right?
right?
Yes.
So if
So
I
if I
click on
click on
any one
any
of
one of
them,
them,
every
every
time I
time I
click on,
click,
so if I
so if I
click on
click on
Utkarsh, you will
Utkarsh,
do
you will
a
do
one
a one
lookup called
lookup called
find
find
one,
one,
right?
right?
You are
You are
checking
Right.
that
checking that
whether
whether
a
a
chat
chat
room
room
of
of
Utkarsh
Utkarsh
Chat.
and
and
Anshu is
Anshu is
exist or
exist or
not. If
not.
I
If I
click on
click on
Sanambir, you
Sanambir,
will
you
do
will
that
Right.
do that
lookup,
lookup,
right?
right?
And
And
Hmm.
this is
Right.
this
this
click is
click
going
is
to be
going to be
pretty
pretty
often,
often,
right?
right?
So on
So on
every
every
Right.
click
click
to
to
you are
you are
doing this
doing this
lookup,
lookup,
right?
right?
Now my
Now my
question is
question is
Right.
that
that
this
this
is
is
very
very unoptimal,
inefficient,
inefficient,
right?
right?
You can
We can
Okay.
save
save
this
this
lookup.
lookup.
The
The
reason is
reason is
that
that
so
so
let's go
let's go
back
back
to
to
the
the
my
my
first
first
thing when I
thing
was
when I was
talking
talking
about the
about the
friends.
friends.
So
So
when
when
Sanambir
Sanambir
Singh, when
Singh,
I
when I
send
send
you
you
a
a
request to
request to
Sanambir,
Sanambir,
right?
right?
When you are
When you are
creating
creating
that
that
friend,
friend,
right?
right, is
When you are
when you are
registering this
registering this
friendship
friendship
in your
in your
database,
database,
there
there
only
only
you
you
can
can
create
create
a
a
chat
chat
room,
room.
or
Or
let's say
let's say I'm
there
there
only
only you
you can
can
use the
use the
ID
ID
to
to
create that
create that
chat room,
chat room,
because
because
you don't
you
have
don't
to
have to
create it
create it
also.
also.
You
You
know
know
that
that
when there
when
is a
there is a
friend, there
friend,
is
there is
already a
already a
chat
chat
room
room
exists,
exist,
right?
right?
And you
And
don't
you
have
don't
to
have to
do
do
this
this
lookup
lookup
because this
because this
lookup is
lookup is
costly,
costly,
right?
right?
Because it's
Because it's
going to be
going to be
quite
quite
often,
Right.
often,
right?
right?
So
So
you
you
can,
can,
because
because
see,
see,
when I
when I
send a
send a
friend
friend
request,
request,
that
that
is,
is
I'm going
I'm
to
going
do
to
it
do it
only
only
once.
once.
I'm
I'm
not going
not
to
going to
send one
send one
other
other
request
request
once we
once
are
we are
friends,
friends,
right? So
right? So
that is
that is
going to be
going
the
to be the
number
Hmm.
of
number of
operations
operations
happening.
happening.
The
The
API call
API call
happening on
happening on
this will
this
be
will be far less than the number of API call that is getting made on this, where you have the chat room one, right? And you are making a
Right.
lookup on every API call. So
that is
that is
very
very, very
Right.
inefficient,
Right.
inefficient,
right?
right?
Yes,
So
got
So
it now.
just
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
So
just
just
remove this
remove this
lookup.
lookup.
This is
This is
not
not
necessary
necessary
at
at
all,
all,
and you
and you
can
can
just
just
handle it
handle
with
it with
Yeah.
the
the
friendship
friendship
logic.
logic.
Also, like one question. Am I audible?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
you
yes,
are.
you are.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So whenever a user clicks on global chat, do we send a post request every time? The create chat request every time?
Um, so behind the scenes, when you type a message and when you click the send button, the message that you are seeing is first of all handled by the socket, and behind there's a async call where we save the message in the database.
No,
So,
no. I'm not asking about the send button. There was a global
okay,
chat button, right?
right, right.
So whenever we click on that global chat button, uh,
Go
does
to
it
home page. Yeah. Hmm.
does it send a create chat call every time?
Okay, yeah, that was Anshu have mentioned earlier. So on each every time when user clicks on the global chat, each time the request has been is being sent to the server to join the room and fetch the data. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So ideally, this doesn't seem to like this seems a bit like incorrect because we are sending a create chat request every time. So I think this can be avoided by
I think we lost Smith.
Yeah, he's
Yeah, he's
gone.
back.
yeah, yes. So sorry, am I audible now?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yes. What I mean to say is this the logic of like calling a create new chat request every time a user clicks on global chat doesn't seem too ideal to me. Like it something feels a bit wrong. So I think this can be improved by changing the model parameters or model fields a bit. So let's not discuss it in this PR, but we should like,
Yes.
see
Yes. Got it.
like the ideally this create call should not go every time, even though we are not creating it, but even the call shouldn't be made.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
like
if we
if we
move the
move the
logic
logic
to
to
like
like
creating a
creating a
group
group
or
or
creating a
creating a
friend,
friend,
so
so
when the
when the
user
user
initiate,
initiate,
when you
when you
send a
send a
friend
friend
request or
request
when
or
you
when you
create a
create a
group,
group,
at
at
that
that
time
time
only
only
you
you
create these
create these
chat
chat
rooms,
rooms,
right?
right?
And
And
then
then
Yes.
after
For
after
that
the
you
that you
first
just
load
time.
it,
load it,
yeah, for
yeah,
the
for the
first
first
time,
time,
and
and
that
that
should be
should be
the
the
Yeah.
user
user
driven
driven
when the
when the
user is
user is
doing it,
doing it,
and
and
then you
then you
don't do
don't
it
do
at
it
all,
at all,
right?
right?
Right. Yes.
Correct.
Noted.
Cool.
Cool,
Then
then
let's
let's
move
move
forward.
forward.
You are
You are
doing a
doing a
check.
check.
If there
If
is
there
a
is a
chat
chat
room,
room,
you are
you
just
are just
sending the
sending the
data.
data.
And
And
I
I
think
think the
format
format
is
is
something we
something we
can
can
discuss
discuss
about
about
it.
it,
The way
the
you are
way you're
sending,
sending,
exposing
exposing
this
this
information,
information,
but
but
I
I
think
think
you're
you're
following a
following a
generic
generic
response
response
structure
structure
for the
for the
200
200
ones.
ones.
Uh, I don't think so. Like, so I have followed. Okay, so the scenario was made my own API following that documentation. So I don't know about the what is a structure, but I followed
Mm.
the previous someone's, or you can say like course instructors documentation.
Okay.
Okay, okay.
So
So
generally,
generally,
the
the
response
response
structure
structure
should be
should be
same
same
for all
for
the
all the
200.
200.
It should
It should
not
not
change.
change.
Yeah, that wrapper will help. Also,
Okay.
also try to ensure like the chat room field, right? Whatever you send inside the chat room should stay as consistent and as uniform as possible. Like one very like gold standard of this principle is Stripe APIs. So you can refer to the Stripe APIs where each and every object inside Stripe will always be returned the same no matter where you call it, which endpoint you call it. It always remains the same. Anshu, maybe you can like
Okay.
open the Stripe APIs documentation here or like share it with Ambir.
Okay. So the idea is to uniformize the response, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Basically, you are exposing a chat room, right? Yeah, go to the customers page. No, not the docs. Just click on API reference here,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
top bar. Uh, not stripe.js. No, no, no.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
think
think
this
this
should
should
be.
be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
this
only.
one
This.
is this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you see, you can take any of this object, and it will always have this. Don't click on errors. Go to the core resources section. Go to customers in core resources section.
Customers.
Customers.
On the left.
Bottom left.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the customer object that Stripe has, right? And as I mentioned, like each and every customer object, wherever it is in Stripe, will always have this exact schema. So we should always design our APIs in like what Stripe has done. So the chat room that you are sending there should always like in whichever like in future you may have a update chat or get chat or any patch chat in any endpoint. In that point, the chat room should always have a custom object. Similarly,
Yes.
I think
I
we
think we
lost him
lost him
chat,
again.
again.
Mm,
Smith, we
Smith, we
lost you
lost you
for.
for.
sorry, where
Yeah.
like what was the last thing that you heard?
Uh,
Uh,
the
the
basically
basically
this
this
each and
each and
every
every
chat
chat
room
room
should
should
API where
API
Ah,
you are
where you're
consuming
consuming
chat room
chat room
should
should
have the
have the
same
same
schema.
schema.
same structure, right? Yeah, that is one thing. And the second thing that I'm saying is like you are returning the entire chat room thing, right? Anshu, can you go to the PR one?
Yes.
Yes.
Hmm. What exactly is chat room? It is the model row, right? The database model row.
yes, yes.
I think
I think
All
you
the
So
data
can
that,
are populated.
you can
you can
better the
better the
name.
name,
hmm,
and
that
then
The
the
name is
name is
also
also
like
like
it's
it's
not
not
clearly
clearly
saying
saying
that
that
what
what
is
is
this
this
data.
data.
Yeah. Mhm.
hmm.
Got
The
it.
name is one thing, and the other thing is we should avoid trying to send the entire model row because it can have some internal identifier like the ID of that row, that the table ID or the row ID, right? Which we
Hmm.
might not want to expose it to the end user. And
Okay.
all there could be a new field that could be introduced in the future which might be sensitive. So we should always have a
Hmm.
some sort of a like a helper function or a util function in that model that exposes only certain fields that we might want to expose, right? So
Okay. Noted.
that is one thing. Yeah, you can either use a select or your model function can have a helper function that like in itself selects the response field.
Specific
Like you have a
rows.
two JSON in sales, right? Like you might not be aware, but two JSON in sales behaves in the similar way. So I believe all of the languages would have a similar function. So yeah.
Okay.
Hmm. So let's go below. So we create a new chat room, and if there is some error in creating the chat room. Okay, one more thing here, right? So you said that the type we updated the type to custom, but the so why do we need both chat room? Okay, we here we're
Um,
creating, but the type and chat room are both contain the same information, right?
yes,
Chat room
yes.
ID and type.
Mhm.
So yeah, again, this also is a problem in the model layer. Like this can be improved because we are storing the same information in two different columns. I know it can be different in some cases, but in some
Right.
cases it is same. So that thing can be improved. There is a scope of improvement here, right?
Okay.
And users is data sender. Okay. Why is the receiver not being sent here? Why are we storing only the sender?
Okay. Okay. So um, there is no concept of one to one. So all the users except you are the senders, right? So even you yourself is a sender, but in the logic layer where in the front end of the application, I'm using some if-else condition where if the current logged in user matches the sender, then it is the receiver. It becomes the receiver. Make sense?
Uh, I didn't get the logic.
Okay, so you yourself is also a sender because
Correct.
in the front end, I wrote some conditions where if the sender is yourself, then you are becoming the receiver. So you are on the right side of the chatting application. So all the rest of the users are on the left side of the applications.
Got it.
Okay, simple if else condition.
But what I didn't get, like, what this has to do with the database entry. Like,
Okay, so I'm adding the sender user object because I need to get the informations like email, username, and avatars. So that's why
No,
No,
that
adding the
is,
sender.
yeah,
yeah,
that is
that is
correct. Of
correct. Of
course, you
course,
need
you
to
need to
send the
send the
list of
list of
users,
users,
but the
but the
question
question
is
is
Hmm.
why
why like
the
the
senders
senders
mean you are
mean you are
not
not
including
including
me,
me,
right?
right?
Hmm.
So
So
like
like
why? What's the
what's the
reason?
reason?
Like
Like
why?
why?
Because you
Because you
already
already
have the
have the
information
information
of
of
me.
me.
That's why. That's why
That's why
you may
you may
not
not
need
need
that.
that.
But
But
yeah,
yeah.
Uh,
so
I
like,
guess
hmm,
this is for the first time that we are creating the chat room.
mm-hmm.
That's why
Mm-hmm.
we are adding the sender.
Got it.
So in the above logic, I guess we haven't added the sender, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
so I think
That's
this sender is more of like, this is more information. Like, this kind of information is more about who created this chat room, right? Like this.
not exactly all the connected users, like that kind of information.
Oh, I got it. Like, ha. So this is like, this is the first time that chat that a group is being created, and since you are creating it, only you are the sender in that, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
no one else has
that's the
been
scenario.
invited, correct?
Hmm. Right, right.
But what if a global room was being created? In that case, everyone will automatically be a sender, right? Or not?
So if the chat room already exists, then the chat room, there's a single global chat room, first of all.
Okay.
And if new user comes, then he becomes the sender of that room.
Hmm.
So he's
Understood.
being populated as a user. Yeah.
But you're
But you're
not
Yeah.
not
updating
updating
that.
that.
Like, okay,
Okay,
let's
let's
think
think
about
about
this,
this,
right?
right?
You are
You are
creating
creating
this
this
chat
chat
room. So
room. So
let's say
let's say
that
that
first
first
time the
time the
group was
group was
created,
created,
and the
and the
next
next
time I
time I
click
click
on
on
join,
join, send a
send a
send a
message in
message
the
in the
global
global
chat.
chat.
You're
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 calling this
calling this
chat
chat
API
API
chat
chat
one,
one,
and
and
this
this
time
time
you're
you are
doing a
doing a
find one
find one
lookup. So
lookup.
you
So
will
you will
find
find
that there's
that there's
already a
already a
chat room
chat
that
room
has
that
been
has been
created,
created,
Hmm.
and you
and
are
you are
pre-populating all
pre-populating
the
all the
details of
details
the
of the
sender,
sender,
right?
right?
Right.
But
But
if I
if I
send the
send
data,
the
I'm
I'm
also the
also the
sender.
sender.
If I
If I
send the
send the
data,
data,
then
then
how are
how
you
are you
updating the
updating the
list of
list of
senders
senders
when
when
I
I
am
am
sending
sending
this
this
thing?
thing?
Because
Because
obviously, let's
obviously,
say
let's say
this is
this
a
is a
group one,
group one,
right?
right?
In the
In the
group,
group,
when you
when you
add a
add a
new
new
user,
user,
you
you
edit the
edit the
number of
number of
users, or
users, or
let's say the
let's say the
number of
number of
senders.
senders.
You
You
make a
make an
update call.
update
You
call. You
update
update
the
the
you
you
add one
add one
more
more
user in
user
the
in the
sender.
sender.
But
But
Yes.
here you
here
are
you are
not
not
doing
doing
it.
it.
So how
So how
does
does
that
that
information is
information is
getting
getting
added?
added?
Okay, so I think I have lost here. Like I'm confused for now.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so the basic idea is for the very first time, there have been there was a single user in the global chat room.
Okay.
Okay.
So that as condition was to satisfy the first condition that no user is present and no chat room have been created till now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
so when let's suppose I am the user and I have clicked on the global chat. So this is the first time happening, right?
Correct.
There
Correct.
wasn't a global chat room and there wasn't a single user.
Correct.
So
Correct.
that was the scenario for the else condition.
Correct.
Correct.
Now, let's suppose Anshu, you joined the global chat room.
Correct.
That
Correct.
was handled in the if condition
Yes.
because
Yes.
the chat room exists.
Correct.
Correct.
Now, in that chat room, I populate. the user if it does exist. Oh, sorry, if it doesn't exist, then I populate the sender. And if
Mm-hmm.
sender, I guess if sender already exists, then I need to only update the messages. I guess I need to create the message model.
No, but
No, but
here
here
you
Okay.
you're
you're
finding the
finding the
chat
chat
room,
room,
and
and
then if
then
you
if you
find this
find this
chat
Yes.
chat
room,
room,
then you
then
are
you are
populating the
populating the
messages
messages
and the
and the
sender
sender
details,
details,
right?
right?
And you're
Okay.
You're
returning it.
returning
So
Right.
it. So
then
then
when
when
I
I
send the
send the
data for
data
the
for the
second
second
time,
time,
I will
I will
get this
get this
chat
chat
room and
room and
all the
all the
messages
messages
and
and
all the
all the
sender
sender
details
details
from
from
this
this
particular
particular
find one
find one
query
query
itself,
itself,
right?
right?
And your
And your
code will
code will
not go to
Mhm.
not
the
go to
else
the else
block,
block,
correct?
correct?
I think I made the callback hell because there are multiple conditions which are not visible in a single screen. Uh, s- so the basic idea is if the chat room exists,
Mm-hmm.
then see if the user exists or not. So
Ah,
Ah,
in the first
okay,
if condition, there are two conditions in itself, right?
okay,
okay,
So
okay.
that was the code we are missing on.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So if
So
the
if the
chat room
chat room
exists,
exists,
you're
you're
saying
saying
that the
that the
person who
person who
trying to
trying to
send,
send,
is
is
this
this
user
user
exists in
exists
the
in the
chat
chat
room or
room or
not,
not,
right? Or
right?
in the
Or in the
sender
Right,
sender
list or
list
not?
or
right.
And
not.
then
And
if
then
it
if it
doesn't
doesn't
exist, then
exist,
you are
then you are
updating the
updating the
sender
sender
list.
list.
Sender. Yes,
Oh,
yes.
this is
This is
bad.
bad.
Yeah, I know. I thought about this and but I haven't corrected it yet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is
this is
super
super,
super
super
bad.
bad.
Uh,
Uh,
cool. Do
cool.
we
Do we
want to
want to
continue,
continue,
or I
or I
think we
think we
have
have
enough
enough
comments as
comments
of
as of
now
now
for
for
Sanambir
Sanambir
to
to
fixes
fixes
and to
and to
look
look
into?
into?
Yeah, let's try to address all these comments before, like otherwise it will become too much
Yeah,
Yeah, too
of
much.
fixes for this time. So yeah. Also, one more thing, Sanamir, like let's try to
Mhm.
ensure that whatever like review comment that we get right, let's try to ensure that we uh, try to avoid making the same error as before, right? For example, like today we got a console log. Let's try to ensure that this does not, like you try to avoid pushing a console.log as far as possible, right? Because
Okay.
like yeah, this will show your like one growth,
Mhm.
and this will also save a lot of time, like to avoid repetitive comments, right? So try to incorporate like things like linting, like there are certain like what to say extensions that like highlight if there is any linting error or white
Mhm.
spaces error, or if we have some unwanted console.log in our code. So all of
I
this should.
heard of the linting, but I haven't started the process of like implementing how uh,
Hmm,
to before pushing into production how to see those
correct.
highlights.
So it is very simple. Like which IDE do you use? Do you use VS Code?
VS Code.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for JS, VS Code has a very like good extension called Prettier, right?
Okay.
So in
Mhm.
VS Code, there is a on the left-hand side tab, there is a section called extensions. If you have
Mhm.
seen it, you can like download Prettier from there, just reload the VS Code, and it will automatically start working. Uh,
Right, right. Mhm.
so it will automatically highlight stuff for you, and it is very useful to catch all of these like errors, right? So try to incorporate extensions to avoid such errors, and try to avoid pushing the same issues like again and again. It will also
Mhm.
save a lot of time for the reviewer. So
Yes.
fasten up your code review a lot.
I want to add one point. Like, I'm on the learning phase, right? So the reason behind why I left those console log because for now I'm in learning phase, right? So I'm sure that I'm only the user of that application. So I can ensure that if error appears, I can easily get to know like when does that error occurs, or I can easily see that in the consoles rather than um, banging my head around like where does the code go wrong. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's fine if you are the only user right now, but it's ideally not a good practice. If you are,
Okay.
if you if you find console.log is easier, there is one more thing called the debugger,
Okay.
right? It might be a bit like tricky to configure it like initially, but once it is configured, it is like very, very, very useful, and it offers a lot more functionalities than as compared to a console.log. Like you can stop execution at a certain place and stuff like that. So try,
Breakpoints.
you can add breakpoints, correct? I think you are already aware of a debugger.
Yes.
So yeah, it is a bit like I can understand that a console adding a console.log is much more like
Hmm.
easy and time saving. But
Yes.
yeah, if you invest some time and configure a debugger, it is a good practice.
Okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Just
Just
to
to
add on
add
top
on
of
top of
that,
that,
so
so
you
you
said
said
that
that
because you
because
are
you
a
are a
single
single
one
one
and
and
right
right
now you
now you
are
are
still
still
developing,
developing,
so
so a
couple of
couple of
points
points
here,
here,
right?
right?
So you
So
have
you have
already
already
deployed this
deployed this
code to
code to
production,
production,
right? I
right?
can
I
see
can
it's
see it's
hosted on
hosted on
Yes.
AWS,
AWS,
right?
right?
Now,
Now,
whenever you
whenever
are
you are
making
making
any
any
code
code
production
production
ready,
ready,
I
I
mean,
mean,
there
there
should
should
not be
not be
any
any
logs.
logs. You
You should
should
not be
not be
exposing
exposing
information,
information,
right?
right?
Your
Your
logs
logs
can
can
expose
expose
a
a
lot of
lot of
security
security
tokens,
tokens,
your
your
secrets,
secrets,
right?
right?
And
And
when you
when
are
you are
using
using
AWS
AWS
systems,
systems,
especially in the
especially in the
free
free
tiers,
tiers,
those
those
are
are
like
like
shared
shared
virtual
virtual
machines,
machines,
right?
right?
And
And
these
these
are
are
like
like
resources
resources
can be
can be
exposed. People
exposed.
can
People can
expose.
expose.
Someone
Someone
can
can
get
get
into your
into your
VMs and
VMs
they
and
can
they
create
can
all
create
those
all
things,
those things,
right?
right?
So
So
even if
even
you
if you
are
are
doing a
doing a
log,
log,
just
just
create a
create a
custom
custom
log
log
function
function
and
and
write some
write some
sanity
sanity
checks
checks
there
there
and
and
only
only
expose
expose
information
information
which
which
should
should
be
be
enough for
enough for
you to
you to
understand the
understand the
flow of
flow
the
of the
code,
code,
and it
and
should
it should
not
not
leak
leak
any
any
information
information
of the
of the
user,
user,
right?
right?
Okay.
Or any
Or any
secret. I mean,
secret.
you
I mean, you
can't
can't
afford to
afford to
expose
expose
information of
information
the
of the
users.
users.
You can
You
just
can
put
just
a
put a
logs
logs
that
that
shows
shows
that
that
okay,
okay,
this is the
this is the
flow of the
flow of the
code.
code.
That should
That
be
should be
like in
like in
case
case
where you
where you
want to
want to
still in the
still in the
development one,
development one,
so
so
that you
that you
can go
can go
into
into
your
your
logs,
logs,
production
production
logs, and
logs,
see
and see
the
the
system
system
logs
logs
there.
there,
But do
but do
not
not
like
like
write
write
raw
raw
console
console
logs. These
logs.
are
These
like
are like
really
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 bad.
bad.
The
The
moment you
moment you
ship it to
ship it to
productions,
productions, you
you can
can
never
never
you
you
can't
can't
afford
afford
this.
this.
Also,
Also,
like these
like
are
these
the
are the
small
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 things
things
that we
that we
don't
don't
care in the
care in the
beginning,
beginning,
but
but
these
these
get
get
into our
into our
Hmm.
habits,
habits,
and
and
you
you
can
can
Yes.
always give
always give
explanation
explanation
for
for
this.
this.
But
But
once
once
you
you
get
get
into the
into the
industry, I
industry, I
mean,
mean,
these are the
these are the
little
little
things
things
start
start
hampering
hampering
your
your
code
code
quality,
quality,
right?
right?
So
Yes.
we
So we
should
should
avoid it.
avoid it.
Definitely. Until now, I nobody told me the importance of not adding the console logs. So that's a great. Line.
Cool.
Cool.
I
I
think
think
any more
any more
points,
points,
Smith?
Smith?
No, I think we are good for now.
So yeah,
So yeah,
Sanam,
Sanam,
that's
that's
it.
it.
I
I
think
think
we
we
just
just
wrapped
wrapped
up
up
PR
PR
reviews.
reviews.
So we
So we
started with
started
the
with the
blind
blind
spot,
spot,
but
but
yeah,
yeah,
this
this
turned
turned
to
to
out to
out to
be a
be a
pretty
pretty
insightful
insightful
one.
one.
Pretty much
Pretty much
sure
sure
that
that
people
people
out
out
there,
there,
especially
especially
every
every
level,
level,
fresher
fresher
level,
level,
people
people
who
who
are
are
working in
working
the
in the
companies,
companies,
they
they
will
will
get
get
to
to
know
know
about
about
the
the
process
process
of the
of the
code
code
reviews,
reviews,
how
how
it
it
happens.
happens.
It was
It was
pretty
pretty
close to
close
the
to the
actual
actual
code
code
review
review that
that happens
happens
in the
in the
industry.
industry.
So yeah,
So yeah,
that
that
was
was
a
a
pretty
pretty
good
good
one.
one.
Yeah, great job, Sanambir. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
yeah,
Good
Good
job,
job,
Smith.
Smith.
Cool,
yeah.
Cool,
guys.
guys.
So
So
yeah,
yeah,
Thank you.
I will
I
end
will
the
end the
I will end the
session
session
right
right
here.
here.